Hi everyone, I'm Tony from Floor Street and today I'm with Connor from Hinch Flooring Services, and Connor is a flooring expert and today he's going to show us how to fit a herringbone floor, and in Pacific a very popular one, desert oak herringbone. Connor, I don't know if there's anything you want to say or if you want to get straight into it, but essentially we need your expertise, mate, because a lot of customers are buying desert oak flooring and struggling to fit it.
Okay, happy to help here, Tony. So I think we'll just dive right in and just get on with it.
Much appreciated, mate. Let's go.
Firstly, we're going to start with our tools. So the first tool is our jigsaw or handsaw if you don't have access to a jigsaw. We also need a hammer. We're going to require a tapping block as well. A very key part for herringbone installation is being able to mark out the center of your room for installation. Now we can do this in one of two ways. We have the option of a chalk line and a laser level. We'll show you both here today. Finally then, we are going to need our tri-square, which will be used for marking our straight and angled cuts. So the first step before we start installing our floor is we need to check our subfloor underneath. So we want to do a moisture content check as well as checking the level of the floor. So here we want to check our level now, sitting down with our straight edge across, checking down along to see that we're sitting nice and flat with no major inconsistencies across the subfloor. Just checking overall level and we're good. So guys, the first thing we need to start off by doing for a herringbone installation is finding our center point of the room. So the easiest way to do that is to take your trusty tape measure, and we're going to go from one wall to the other wall. Now this is the key part. We're measuring across the width of the room, not the longest part of the room, because we want to run the crown and our chevrons down the longest part of the room. So we're going to take our short run, find our center point, and from there we'll mark out our center line. And our mark is 5.1 meters across. So now we're going to go back and find the center point of our room. So having measured our room width at 5.1 meters, our halfway mark now is going to be at 2.55 meters. So again, now we've moved to the top end of the area that we're installing onto, and now we're going to mark once again off the same wall our 255 mark. So find our mark, pencil in, and now we're ready for our chalk line. So now we're just going to bring down through our two marks, continue our chalk line straight the way down to the bottom of the room, pinning it off, making sure that we're through both of our marks. And it's just a simple case then of pull it nice and taut and snap. So what we're going to do is just simply line our laser level to our existing chalk line, set in place, and we're ready to go. So after installing our underlay, what we need to do now is take our Stanley knife, coming across the line and just cutting back any of our excess. So now that we've installed our underlayment, next thing to do, take our first box, get it opened up. Now with our herringbone floors, we have our A boards and our B boards. So here we can see our A boards, which are clearly marked on the back, along with our B boards, which are also clearly marked in the back. What we're going to do is start off by building our first triangle. So we're taking our B boards to our left hand side, A boards to our right hand side, and we're going to start off by slotting in, locking down, make sure we're flush with a tapping block, and then just continue on until all boards are locked in together. So having put our 6 boards together, what we're going to take now is another one of our B boards, which we used on our left hand side, and now we're going to lock it in to the upper part of the joint on our A board on this side, and this is going to help us for marking out then our first triangle. So what we do is we take our level, our straight edge, we're going to put it to the inner tip point here on this side and the tip point to the outside here. Leveled up. Take your pencil. And now we're ready for our first cut. So now that we've marked off our triangle, we're going to get ready to cut. So if we don't have a workbench at home, handy thing to use is a couple of the packs of flooring that we're going to be installing. And simply we just set our triangle up on top, taking our jigsaw in this case, though you can also use your handsaw. Just make sure that we've got enough overhang where we're going to be cutting, so we don't end up cutting into either your workbench or into your packs of flooring. And simply what we're doing is just going to follow the line. So that's it, our first triangle ready to go. Now, important to remember, all these offcuts that we have in this, that have come off our first cut, we need to set them aside. We'll be using them later on. So it's time now to put our first cut into place. So we're going to slide it up towards the wall. And then what we need to do next is we need to install some wedges for our expansion. So we need to leave between 8 and 10 mil of expansion around the entire perimeter of our floor. So we're going to start off with a couple of our spacers now. Next step is we need to now find the center point of our triangle to start the floor. So whenever we're centering off our first triangle to start with, the misconception is people assume that this is our center point at the tip of our triangle, when in fact what we need to do is we need to mark our halfway point of this board, which these boards are 100 mil wide. So we're looking at the 50 mil mark here. Then same again, we're going to mark from this side of this board, being continuation here. So we need to bring this one out again. We're looking at the 50 mil mark to there, which we'll mark just there. Now with those 2 points marked, what we need to do is we need to line up with our laser point here, and then again with our laser point into here. Now it's time to start putting in the rest of our boards. The handiest thing we can do is to lay out our B boards and our A boards ahead of ourselves, and that way then we can quickly start to install. So starting off with our A board, and this is how it goes in. So simply we're just going to slide into place, lock our first board in. Key thing here is to make sure that our joints line up smoothly across this edge. Now, to get those joints properly locked in together, we're going to use a tapping block. Pulls them together, just a quick rub over, check to make sure everything's flush. If we're not 100% flush, again, we can just pop that board back up out of place, bring it back up to where it should be. Again, lock in, tap up, and we're perfect. Going to carry on with our next board now. Coming in with our B. Same process again. Push down, check our joint, all good. Tap up. You want to see the quickest fitter around? Let's go. So once we get to the top end of our room, what we want to do is, again, we just want to mark off our halfway point at our last board. That way then we can run back through our laser line to make sure that we are still level. As we can see here, we're slightly off. So what we need to do now is we need to adjust this line onto that line, laser level going straight through, and that means we're back on center again. So having now got to the top of our room, it's time for us to start coming back down the other way. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to interchange our boards, swap them over. So our B boards are now going to be brought over to our right hand side to continue then back down the row again. So our A boards as well, we can just swap them across, out of the way. B boards back into play. And it's important just check to make sure that B boards written on the back, we can see that. Our joint and locking system then is going to connect back in and allow us to continue on down. Once again, just make sure your joint's well locked in together, and again, run the finger over to make sure that everything is flush. So having locked in our long joint on this herringbone floor, what we're going to do now is we're going to tap up our short joint at the edge. Now this is for this particular locking system on these particular laminate herringbones. Other herringbones will have other installation methods to go along with it, but we're going to talk about what we have in front of us now. So very, very simple. You can use either your beater block or you can also use a pull bar. And simply all we want to do is we want to position the block or bar just at the edge, far edge away from our joint. And with our hammer, we're just going to gently tap up. Now make sure that once the joint is closed, don't continue to tap on beyond that, because what we can do is we can end up kicking the other joints that we've already installed slightly out of line. So it's about having that gentle touch whenever we're installing a herringbone. So now we've finished our row with our B boards, we're going to swap back over again back to our A's. So first board in, again, just make sure, check to see what way your lock system needs to be installed. Get the first board in. Make sure those joints are lined up nicely, running across, and that's us ready to go. So once we get to our outside edge, we're not going to have enough space there to allow for our tapping block to get in and be able to hammer back. So this is whenever we need to pull out our pull bar, and very, very simple. Now, whenever using the pull bar, the key thing is our edge, you want it to be sitting down just over the edge of the flooring. You don't want it resting on the tongue or the groove. So that way we're not going to damage any of the locking system. And simple case then, place your hand down, support the bar, and with our hammer then, we're just going to simply knock back. And again, same as before, we don't want to overhit as we lock in the joints. We just want them to close over, lock into place, and then move on to the next one. So now we're just going to measure out this cut. So we've went from our A, B, A, we're back to our B board again, up this side, so we can just again check along the back. So we can see here measuring off that I'm going to need a cut of 72 mil coming off the back. Our measurement was taken from this point up to the wall. Our board is going to lock in along this edge, so we're taking our measurement from this point up. So take out our tape measure again. We're going to mark at our 72 mil mark there. This is where our tri-square comes in quite handy then, because we can do our straight cuts in our 45 degrees. We need to look at the angle of our cut. So our board's going to come up and then it's going away. So this is actually going to be our longest point to this side. So make sure that we line up to make the mark away our longest cut. And now we're just going to cut the board and install. So now we have our board cut, and it's just a case now of setting in. Once again, we're looking to make sure that our joint at the back end here is all lined up. So a little bit of jigging around. And once we're ready then, we just drop and give it a wee wiggle just so the joint locks in and engages. So our next board now cut, what we want to do is, whereas before we were looking to lock in on the long joint and then tap up, just with these 45-degree angles against the wall, we tend to find it's a bit easier actually if what we do is we lock in our short end first of all, bring up our long end, and again then we're going to call in our tap bar hammer, and it's just a simple case of simple easy tap. There will be some movement can happen as you go along, so just key to keep everything locked in. This board on the first cut, don't worry, it will kick out on you slightly, and what we want to do is again just using our tapping block on this side, and we would normally have our wedges just jammed off to this point, and it's just tapping in till our board locks. Wee bit of play still in it. Again, drop in, tap, and we are good to go. So now we've come to the end of our floor installation, and the last thing we want to do is we want to fill these triangle voids that we have on the floor. So if you remember from our first cut that we did, where we created our very first triangle to build our crown and everything off of that, if you remember those offcuts we had before and we said, make sure not to throw them away, we're going to use them later. So these are our offcuts, and what you'll see is whenever they go inverted onto themselves, they actually create the triangle that we're going to need to finish this last space. So first thing we need to do is we want to break these apart. We're going to join everything back together again. So we have our triangle. Now we just need to make sure our measurements are correct for this area. So what we're going to do is take our tape measure, come across. We are 59.8. And we are to this side, 59.8. So taking this back to our triangle again, measuring off, we are 59.8 to this side, and we are 59.8 to this side. Now, we've gotten very lucky today with a good setup and a good layout and a nice shape to be working in. Sometimes these triangles might be slightly off, as we said again. It's very rare you come across a perfectly squared room with 90-degree walls to each other. There might be some runoff. So just make sure, take your measurements, left side, right side, translate those measurements across onto our final triangle. Then we would be able to make our two marks, lining them up together using our straight edge. Draw your line, make your cut, and then it's a simple case of taking your boards apart and installing them one by one into place. Something actually, just as a wee fitter's tip, if a joint doesn't seem to be locking into place, just take a quick check to make sure we haven't just a wee bit of excess wood. Sometimes it doesn't happen all the time, very infrequently, but it can happen. So if you're wondering why a joint's not going together, that's part of the reason why. Now, as you can see, easy quick lock in. I'm going to take our pull bar, locked into place, and then our final piece we'll be able to set in, pull bar again, and that's how it's done.
Right, Connor, that looks wonderful, mate.
Thank you very much.
You made that look very easy. I'd imagine it's not the when you're actually doing it.
No, it can be a wee bit more time consuming than the area we fitted here today, but if people just follow these simple, straightforward steps as they go at home, they should be able to do it, not a problem.
Sounds good. Any top tips, anything like that? Anything in specific they need to do, for example, if they're going through a doorway or going into a hallway or anything like that, or essentially like the fundamentals are the same wherever you're fitting it?
Essentially, fundamentals stay fairly similar throughout all areas and spaces. Key things are make sure you have plenty of expansion around your floor.
That's right.
In doorways, it is recommended that we do put breaks in doorways.
That's right.
And making sure that our subfloor preparations are done in advance, so that we have no issues coming back on the floor. Makes sense.
That's a good point you made, actually, the doorways. So we get a lot of customers that want to follow the fruit into different areas of the house without having a separation at the door. So I know it is recommended to, make that cut and do put a threshold through, but just between me and you, if you didn't want to do that because you wanted to have that, throughout look, can you do it? Is it okay to do it? When is it really not okay to do it?
So the simple answer is yes, you can do it. I have done it before as well for customers who've asked the question. What we always recommend to a customer on completing the job and leaving the job is we would say to them, look, make sure to keep an eye on those areas in the doorway, because when the floor expands or it tries to move on itself, in that doorway, it's the first place where it's actually going to catch itself.
Exactly.
If there's not enough room for expansion. The other big factor that comes into play is the climates between the two different areas. So if we have a room that doesn't get used that often, and maybe you have your radiator switched off in that room, connected to a room that is a heavy traffic area with a lot of heat going through it, it means the two floors are the same floor connected is going to want to act differently in 2 different areas.
I understand.
So that would be the things to be thinking about whenever you're looking to actually flow a floor through from one room to the next.
That's right. Like yourself as well, we've done that for customers too, or we have customers that have done that and also ran into problems. And am I right to thinking that if you ever do that and do run into a problem where your floor is moving around and it's causing problems, can you afterwards then just make a cut down the middle of the road, make that expansion and just fit a threshold on after?
We can indeed. It's a simple relief cut that we can make between the 2 floors and then separating them off so they can move freely off each other.
Cool, wonderful. And one last one, mate, I just want to make a point here. You cannot put a kitchen on top of this floor or any floating floor, can you? Or anything that is fixed to the ground or
Definitely not.
Good.
Keep it away from it. Let
kitchen fitters, just so you know.
It's an industry standard. Keep them off it. Keep them off it.
And if you get your customer to do that, they will lose the warranty of their floor. So if a problem does occur, then essentially we're in a position where we can't help as much as we want to. So yeah, follow the rules and regulations as much as we can. Things like the door, obviously, it's an easy fix afterwards if need be. Hopefully 9 out of 10 times, it always kind of works out and it does look a lot better. So, you know, we do sometimes have leeways with these things, but you know, having a kitchen on top of a floating floor is just something that is due to cause a problem at some point or another. Connor, much appreciated, mate. It's been a pleasure. I know we're going to make some more videos together as well, but yeah, it's been fun.
Brilliant.
Thanks, bro.
Cheers, Donny.
Cheers, mate.